How many years you've been a rep?
It's a fourth term, 7 years now, going on 8.
Hi, I'm Bill Doherty, Barnstable County Commissioner. It's my pleasure to welcome the viewers to another edition of County Chatter. County Chatter is a program that's intended to give the folks that visit here and who live here some idea of some of the regional activities that go on. And what could be more important than hearing from Sarah Peake, the representative of the 4th Barnstable District, and my representative, about some of the things that have gone on here. Welcome, Sarah.
Bill, thank you. It's always wonderful to be on your program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I think that people would like to hear what you've been doing. I know this is your 4th term, but what have you been doing during the first part of your 4th term?
Well, let me just take a minute to roll up my sleeves, because that's what I feel like I've been doing for the first part of this session. First, as the session began, there was a shuffling of chairmanships, and as you may recall, last session I was the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Tourism, Arts, and Cultural Development. And what a wonderful opportunity that provided for me to learn more about and to work closely with our cultural partners here on the Cape and across the Commonwealth, as well as with the Cape Cod Chamber, our local chambers, and the regional tourism offices throughout Massachusetts. But this session, the speaker had something else in mind for me. He said, I have a big committee with a lot of bills, some of which are controversial, some of which require a lawyer's skills and somebody who knows how to run a good meeting. So he made me chair, and as a former selectman, I was thrilled with this. He made me chair of the Joint Committee on Municipalities and Regional Government.
And I'm thrilled that you're there, since I serve on the Mass Municipal Associations Committee on Regional Administration, and we're looking forward to the visit you're going to have.
That's right. That's coming up, I think, sometime in
October.
September, October, something along those lines. But it's a wonderful committee, very different from tourism and the arts. And by the way, I haven't cast off the lines and left tourism and arts behind at the dock. It's too important for all of us here on Cape Cod. Still work very closely with our cultural partners here, with the local tourism offices, and as I said before, the Cape Cod Chamber. In fact, just next Wednesday, I am in New Orleans as we celebrate their cultural district designation, and Anita Walker from Mass Cultural Council is coming down. Yeah, it's a really great thing, and a big feather in their cap. But with the Municipalities Committee, the lion's share of home rule bills that come up from the local towns, and the 8 towns of the 4th Barnstable District are activist communities, so many of those bills are my bills, come through my committee. The most controversial and most well-attended hearings are those having to do with dog and cat regulations.
Our feline and canine friends.
That's exactly right. You just have to read the local paper to know that those are the public hearings that the most people go to. We're looking to put into place a sort of lemon law, in effect, that would hold breeders to certain standards. So in other words, if you go and you purchase a puppy, and then within the first couple of weeks you take it to your vet, and your vet says, hey, this dog has hip dysplasia or has a congenital heart defect or something like that, there would be some financial consequences that would accrue back to the breeder for this. Those breeders that are reputable are on board with this. They have no issue with it. And it's a way to kind of root out the puppy mill type scenario.
I think that's so important. We have owned dogs up until until Barbara's mobility came in question, and the thing that we were always concerned about, because we loved chocolate labs, was to get a dog that was that was certain, not just, I don't want to use the word certified, but that we could have some confidence that it was not from an overbreeding place, and because you fall in love with the dog, and the dog becomes part of your family, and I must say that we both miss. We had 2.
Right.
We both missed not having an animal. So it's I know that's one of those gut issues.
That's right, and so many people have been pet owners, but the really interesting thing for me about this committee is so many of these home rule bills come up to us. And I've asked my committee members, as we hear these local bills, let's look at it through the lens of, well, wow, if this is a good idea for, I'll use Framingham because they have a good idea bill. If this is a good idea for Framingham, let's work at, we'll get their bill moving along for them, but let's work at looking at this through the lens of, is this something we could craft as a statewide bill to allow communities to opt in instead of each and every town meeting having to send up their own separate piece of legislation? So what the Framingham bill is they have an issue with a number of abandoned properties, foreclosed properties. And in some cases, the bank that holds the mortgage might be in some distant place and have really very little connection to Massachusetts. The building inspector, the health agent, whoever it might be, goes out and writes summons to them for failure to keep the building safe, secure, locked up. It may be that there's a vermin there. That's how the Board of Health gets involved. But because those are tickets, they are not necessarily, you can't enforce those fines for somebody out of state. So the idea that Framingham came up with was to allow, by a vote, in their case it's a city council, by a vote of the city council to take those fines, which sometimes accumulate fairly significantly, and add them to, in effect, the tax bill from the community. Because as you know, unpaid taxes fall first in line and pay off of the mortgage fall second in line. And by doing that, they get the attention of the company that holds the mortgage, and they see it as both a stick and a carrot. They see it as a way to make their payments, but what they're really looking to do is get the attention of the out-of-state mortgage company to say, hey, you need to hire a property manager and make sure that this property is maintained and kept safe for the rest of the citizens who live in our city and town. So that's one that actually I'm working on in a bipartisan way on that with one of my colleagues on the committee to bring that about statewide.
We'd lived in Wellesley 30 years ago before we came down here, and Natick and Framingham were in an enormous growth spurt at that time. And I know that in the development that occurred in Framingham, we then went through this business with the with what I'd call the underfunded mortgage. So it's understandable that they would be running into that problem right now.
That's right.
So that's something that's a direct contribution that you're making to not just to Cape Cod, but to the state as a whole.
Absolutely. And then we've just come through the budget cycle. We do have a balanced budget that's been signed by the governor. There were a few vetoes that we have overridden. But inside of the budget, we were able to do a number of things, including transportation reform. And one of the
No, be still my heart.
Yes, one of the passions you and I share is for regional transportation.
Yes.
Here, it's the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority. And I have been the House Chair of the Regional Transit Authority Caucus for, I think, 4 years now. And what a caucus is when there's a number of legislators who share a common interest in an issue, and we may not be on the Transportation Committee or have a way to have a say in that committee's doings. We form a caucus and we elect a House chair and a Senate chair. So we have this RTA caucus. Stan Rosenberg has been the Senate chair. He's from Amherst. And for years and years, we've been pushing for a number of things, several accomplishments. Early on, we were able to put the full faith and credit of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts behind any borrowing that the RTAs do. And across the state, that has saved taxpayers millions of dollars because it brings down the interest rate. And we have been consistently pushing for what's called forward funding. Most agencies that are under the umbrella of the state budget, they look at what they get funded through the state budget. They say, oh, okay, we have $32 billion for this fiscal year, and this is how we're going to spend it. With the RTAs, it's not quite that way. They borrow, they operate for a year, and then in the next year's budget, they get paid for that prior year's operating costs.
How well I remember how your interest in becoming a member or starting this caucus came about because of what I'd call nods, winks, and promises that were made because we were expanding service. And
That's
I believe
right.
the flex route, on the Lower Cape, which grows every year and enjoys what I'd call the confidence that comes from having regular service between Harwich and Provincetown. None of that would have come to be if we did not have that service in place. So there we were, the Cape Cod RTA, adding that service, getting, getting community support, and then presenting the bill and being told, "What's this?"
Exactly. 600 million, I think it was that year.
There was a lot of dough.
It was a lot of money,
Yeah.
which we managed to get as a Band-Aid at that time. Well, now, in the Transportation Reform Bill, there is $80 million in there to bring all the regional transit authorities from Pittsfield to Provincetown into a forward funding scenario. So they will become like every state agency. And this, too, is going to save taxpayers millions of dollars. It's going to bring greater transparency to the budget process and bring the RTAs in line with what everybody else is doing. So it's great. It's been a long and sometimes tortuous path. We first identified a funding source with federal toll credits that the MassDOT was not taking advantage of. Turns out the toll credits couldn't actually be spent for the RTAs, but we said, well, we gave you money over here. Why can't you take money for us from a different section of the budget? At any rate,
well, I
here we are.
understand that part of it, because on the
Yes.
NPO, we had to remind the DOT that you could take money that was allocated for highways, but not not allocated, and you could transfer that for the use of public transit, and that's how we increased the. At the RTA, we increased the service so that there's service in the Upper Cape now.
Right.
So there is bus service throughout the Cape, because of that. But the idea of why we continue to emphasize the congestion-rich highway fund without taking into account that every time we get somebody out of a car, that's one less vehicle that's on the road.
That's right. And as you know, public transportation has to be frequent enough, reliable, on time, and affordable for people to want to use it. So forward funding was one piece, and then we were able to increase funding for the regional transit authorities, not just a one-time shot, which will help with capital improvements as well as ongoing service. And the last piece of that is we've been pushing to get our quote-unquote own line item. I don't know how many line items there are in that budget that's this thick. But if you go and you look and you see, like, the sheriff's departments, each county has their own line item under a general law enforcement, public safety sector. Well, when you go to the transportation budget, up until this current year, you would see a MassDOT and a transportation, 2 or 3 line items, and buried somewhere in there was the funding that would be promised to the RTAs without it actually being delineated. And we said, hey, for transparency reasons, for good government reasons, and so we know that what's been promised to us will actually be ours, we want our own line item. And we were successful in that this year, too.
People need to hear the fact that in order for the RTAs to operate, they had to borrow the money.
That's
which
right.
means that the debt service on that was added to the overall bill when it was finally presented.
That's exactly
which
right.
means that service to the to the people that were relying upon public transportation, that cost was unnecessarily increased because you were using interest payments in addition to in addition to paying for it. So we're now more straightforward.
That's exactly. And overhead is cut because, to your point, we don't have to add on, even if it's low borrowing costs, 1.5% or 2% interest. That's still 1.5% to 2% interest that now you don't have to pay, and that can go directly into serving all of our constituents and customers here on the Cape.
So we're helping people get around a little bit better.
Which helps with economic development, by the way. If you can get to work, you can go to work.
And by the way, when I've ridden the bus, I've noticed that there are some what I'd call young adults that might have been driving, but perhaps have, how shall I say, have had some events. And the fact that if it wasn't for the bus, I don't think they'd be able to get to work.
That's
so
right.
It was my hope that and I spoke to this at a recent member of the recent meeting of the LC3 Chambers of Commerce about how important it was for the chambers to get behind the availability of public transportation as an alternative to to get their members' employees back and forth to work. So I don't know if that got on deaf ears or not, but we still keep emphasizing the fact.
I think people hear that and they get it and they understand it. And it's also important for us to continue to have the conversation on Beacon Hill so that when you talk about public transportation, people people just don't think it's the T, that we have public transportation needs out our way.
And
also.
of course, the success of the Cape Flyer is something that...
Tom Kerr, he's a hero
yes,
in my book. Boy,
absolutely.
he is terrific.
Absolutely. We're so lucky to have him at the RTA. Okay, so now transportation, housing, economic development, they're all part of the, the three, part of the things that hold up everything together. You've got some other things that you've been doing, though.
Well, I've of course continued to work closely on fisheries issues. I continue to be the legislator from Massachusetts that sits on the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission.
That's so important.
This is a 15-state organization authorized by the U.S. Congress. We meet at least quarterly and make determinations from, it's basically the beach to 3 miles out. So in other words, fisheries policies in state waters. So it's so critical for us to have a seat at the table. I think it's really great for Cape Cod and the islands to have a seat at the table. That seat has traditionally been a Gloucester or New Bedford seat, so I'm very happy to be there. And as I'm there, my knowledge increases all that much more. Another success in the budget process, we filed what's called an outside section. So it's basically a standalone bill that, in effect, you try to Velcro to the budget to expedite its passage. So as the budget goes through the debate process over in the House and then the Senate and goes on to the governor's desk, this standalone bill travels with it as an outside section. And this is going to be a great help to our lobstermen. Prior to the governor signing this budget into law, it was illegal to sell in Massachusetts, our northern waters, our New England waters, lobster parts. You could sell a whole live lobster. You could buy a South African or Caribbean lobster tail, but you couldn't go into your grocery store or your fish market or any of the larger stores and buy the Omaris americanus, the lobsters that we all buy and eat here. You couldn't buy those tails processed. And what the Mass Lobstermen's Association has told us through studies that they have done is people are looking for easier ways to eat lobster. And not everybody wants to go put the thing in boiling water and deal with all of that, take the lobster crackers out and pick the meat out and all of those things. They want their lobster to be easy for them to handle.
I'll make a confession. We gave our steamer away to my daughter and her husband, and he has a recreational license up in Bourne, and he cooks them.
There you go.
And he brings the tails down for for us. Although I have to say that when I was a kid and we had the wooden boat and we had maybe about 6 or 7 pots, I still smell the bait.
Yeah.
And I have never gotten a fondness for lobster, but I used to have a great fondness for for when we used to go out for the flounder that we used to, the ground fish we used to use for bait. When we used to cook, we'd fillet it, take the carcass, put it in that 55-gallon drum, and eat the fresh fish once a week. But it was so much work to pull hand over hand to pull those pots.
Right.
And then every once in a while, that somebody had readied your pots.
Yes.
And I think at the time we get like 25 cents a pound or something
Right.
like that. And so I know a little bit about the work that goes into it. I also know about how upset you'd get if you saw that somebody was running your line on that. Yeah. So the idea for supporting employment is very important. I think we
because
haven't really
what this
done
will
enough.
mean, the whole idea behind it is to help spike demand for lobster, and when the demand goes up, the price will go up. And as you may recall, last summer there was such a flood of these small lobsters coming in from Canada that it depressed lobster price all along. And so for our local fishermen who bring in a fresh, delicious, I think superior to Canadian or Maine product here in Massachusetts, they weren't getting the price that they deserved or that their product was worth. So now if they have another avenue and venue, a place to sell their lobsters, I think it'll help increase jobs at the processing plants. It'll help bring up the price per pound for our local lobstermen. And it's a win-win situation all the way around. And for the consumer, you can go to your grocery store and buy either frozen or fresh lobster tails now that are from our Massachusetts waters.
Historically, the 3 ways of the 19th century belief was for wealth development was let's see, mining, agriculture, manufacturing, and of course, manufacturing is the conversion of raw materials, into a finished product, and to understand that that's the whole fishery, both the shell fishery and the fin fishery here on the Cape, is a way in which you can have a livable income. I was talking to one fellow from Dennis who was developing some shellfish aquaculture, and the point that he made and others have made that I've seen, that this is an opportunity to provide the means by which you can survive down here and do very well, providing you're willing to do the work.
That's right.
There's a lot of work
and a very sustainable way to provide a delicious and reliable source of protein for humanity, really, especially with the aquaculture that they do with the clams and oysters.
So we're feeding the hungry. We're getting people to where they want to go. We're taking care of what I'd call the concern that people have about taking care of their their pets, let's say their four-footed family members.
Right.
What else has been going on?
Well, as you know, there's been a little shuffling of the chairs politically. In that my state senator, Dan Wolf, has announced that he's running. Our state senator, yes, he's right, for the Cape and Islands district, which is basically
that's where we live.
Mashpee to Provincetown and the islands of Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, and the Elizabeth Islands. So he's tossed his hat into the ring to run for governor. And you can't run for governor and run for re-election for your seat, so this means that the state Senate seat is open. And after taking a hard look at it, I'm just so excited to have this opportunity. I've made the decision to run for the Cape and Islands State Senate seat to fill that vacancy that's being created by Dan moving on up.
Well, I'm ambivalent about that. I think you've done a great job in let's say in supporting the interests of the 4th Barnstable. The programs that you already mentioned. It would be my hope that whoever steps up to let's say to run for your office, would take that into account. Ironically, one of the people that had spoken up about some interest of evaluating it happens to be a driver for the RTA part-time.
There you go.
So he understands the public transportation piece. So that I was encouraged by that.
But Dottie Smith, my chief of staff and good friend who lives in East Orleans, before she came over to work for me, she was retired from AT&T, but she was a driver for the RTA. She drove the Provincetown shuttle. So we also have somebody who has an upfront vision of what it's like.
Well, that practical hands-on connection, I think, is very important.
Absolutely.
Because you kind of get it. All right. So now that's interesting. So here you are, and let's see, you've been a state rep for about 7 years.
Yeah, 4 terms now.
4 terms
that's right.
now, 7 years. And let's see, the thing about state senate is that I don't think people appreciate the fact that the district, Cape and Islands district, means you have to go over to Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard.
That's right.
And that has always seemed kind of daunting. That I know that Tim Madden, who represents as a rep in the Upper Cape.
That's right.
Was I think one of the first reps that actually came from the islands.
One of the islands. That's right. He's from Nantucket.
Nantucket.
That's right.
And I thought that you have to. Every once in a while, you sort of have to shake things up. Okay, so well,
there are transportation challenges, but the opportunities, I think, are so great. And the things we've talked about today, whether it's support of tourism and the arts, whether it's regional transportation issues, helping with sustainability of our economy through supporting our fishermen and aquaculturists, those issues are ones that I'm passionate about and have developed, quite honestly, a certain level of expertise and knowledge. And they don't stop at the Horowitz-Dennis line where my House legislative district stops. These are Cape Cod issues. These are Cape and Islands issues. So I look forward to having the opportunity to work in a more formal sense with the leaders of, whether it's the regional transit organizations, the leaders of the chambers of commerce, the arts organizations throughout the Cape and on the islands, in a role as state senator. And the other great thing I see about it is I love working with my colleagues, whether it's Dave and Randy, or Tim, Cleon. Brian is new this session, but I think also having the opportunity, if the voters honor me with their vote, and if they see fit to put me there, to be in the Senate will enable me, I think, in a more meaningful way to work even more closely with the members of the House delegation, and for us to have a really coordinated effort on things that are important to the lives of all of our constituents. And transportation challenges, I went out to Nantucket last weekend. There were several events, including an autism walk and things. So as I was booking my ferry ticket, looking at the plane schedules, I realized, oh, so now I guess I'm going to put the High Line and Steamship Authority schedules in the same folder I have in my briefcase, where I have Bay State Cruise Company, Boston Harbor Cruises, Cape Air, and the Plymouth and Brockton bus. You know, living in Provincetown, I'm used to balancing public transportation, private transportation, driving my own car, carpooling, using the park and ride. So that too is sort of a natural extension of what I'm already doing in representing the 4th Barnstable.
Well, I would always be convinced that you would get to where you needed to go, but
and I'm a pretty good swimmer, if all else fails.
I heard that.
Yeah.
But you know, you mentioned about the ability to work more closely, with in a more formal way. But do you have some vision as to what you would want to accomplish, if the voters, elected you as state senator?
Yeah, sure. I would want to continue my work on supporting and growing the economy here on the Cape. We've already talked about several of those sectors with the fishing industry, with tourism and the arts, but we're going to have an exciting opportunity moving forward with the rollout of Open Cape and what we can do to enhance the tech sector here and what that really means. And sometimes growing the economy and supporting people in their jobs means fighting back unfair regulations that might have the effect of putting people out of business. We had an issue like that recently with our lobster fishery and some proposed changes that NOAA was proposing, and I went and testified at a hearing. The jury's still out on that, but it's as much watching out to keep bad things from happening as it is having a vision of how to grow things. And I think that I have a track record of showing that I'm able to balance both of those things. The other thing that I really enjoy and would continue to do more of is bringing various stakeholder groups together to meet with state agencies, whether it's our housing advocates and officials here on the Cape. Whoever is governor in 2014, there will probably be a new Secretary of Housing and Economic Development. And I think it's important from the get-go for us to get on his or her radar screen to talk about what our successes are here, what might be a model for the rest of the Commonwealth, but where the state kind of gets in our way and has gotten in our way during this last administration, and then changing those policies so that we can continue to move forward.
Well, I think that's a very ambitious agenda, and of course, I wish you well on it. The housing piece, I absolutely couldn't agree more that sometimes the decisions that are made to support housing are not very supportive, and we do need to have what I'd call good representation, so that all of these important things of transportation, housing, economic development are all part of the piece of the puzzle that makes sense. And of course, we both know that there's two ways to run, either unopposed or scared.
Right.
Okay, and I congratulate you for being interested in wanting to, let's say, to widen your scope. I think you've spent a lot of time learning your trade, as it were. So you're not coming to this as a well. Let's see, I've been a rep for 2 months, and now I want to become a senator. Right. So I think all of these things speak well for for your interest in this. And with that, as these things go like go right by, we've come to the end of it, and I want to thank you for for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And I've always enjoyed your coming in and your willingness to do this. And I'd like to encourage the people who are watching out there that this has been an opportunity to hear something that is going on that's very important with regard to the things that have been done and the things that are yet to do. So you have a part of this. So I hope you're paying attention. And with that, I want to thank Sarah Peake for coming in, and I want to thank the viewers for taking the time to watch another edition of County Chatter. I'm Bill Doherty, Barnstable County Commissioner, and I look forward to seeing you in future editions of the program.